Chapter 9 33 Hours Until Impact. It was freezing outside. Justin was looking forward to getting started on work, as moving his body would help to fend off the cold. Shortly, a few cars began to arrive at the ship, followed by even more. Eventually, one entire side of the valley was covered with cars. By the time all the cars had arrived, a small crowd had formed near the ship, around 1,000 people. John approached the crowd so he could address them. "Good evening, everyone," John began. "Before we commence work on the ship, we need to elect some leaders and put skilled people in charge of certain fields of work. Justin is here from the Solfilius Orbital Gateway. He is here to help us out with our logistical challenges and will be in charge of delivering supplies to and from the ship," John stated clearly. Justin looked at the crowd before him. There were so many people. He felt rather nervous being in front of all of them. Justin gave the crowd a timid wave, keeping his mouth shut. Justin couldn't imagine how Abigail felt now, with all these people around. He glanced over at her. She was sweating profusely and nearly every muscle in her body was clenched tight. She had entered a freeze state. "Go hide in the ship. That way you'll look busy with something and can get away from the people," Justin quietly whispered to Abigail. She glanced at Justin before walking off into the Bronto. Justin was glad he was able to help. John continued to address the crowd. "I believe the best way to move ahead with the operation is to form groups. Each group will be responsible for a different part of the ship or another part of the operation. I suggest we have a group for the hull, the fusion reactor, the graviton warp drive, the engines, the VTOL thrusters, the electrical systems, the computers, life support, and transportation of materials. We should also have another miscellaneous group that will be responsible for any other minor tasks that do not fall under those categories too. Each group will be given the opportunity to elect a leader, who will manage the group and oversee their work," John continued. "Most of the council members will be far too busy with other tasks in preparation for evacuation, so most of them will not be available to take on any leadership roles in these groups, including myself. However, depending on how things pan out, that may change," John added. "Lastly, we will have an engineer to oversee all construction and repair. Either Victor from the council will take the position, or Abigail, one of our senior engineers, will. They will decide between themselves who will take up the role," John finished with. Upon hearing this, Abigail looked around and spotted Victor in the crowd. Victor began walking towards the ship to speak with her. The two then began to discuss who would take up the role. "All those in favour of splitting the work up into groups this way, raise your hand now," John requested. A big group of hands arose from within the crowd. It was almost certainly a majority of the crowd, Justin thought. "Well then, that settles it. We will assemble groups now. I will run over each work group again and let all of you choose what group to work in. I trust that you will select your group based on your own skills and abilities and where you feel you would be most useful," John finished with. John then listed the groups out loud again. Slowly, everyone moved into different smaller groups, breaking off from the crowd. After some reshuffling and moving of people from group to group to optimize the workload, the groups were organized and ready to go. Abigail and Victor left the hangar. Abigail approached John to inform him of her decision. "John, I will be the leading engineer," Abigail said. "Thank you for taking on this role, Abigail. Remember, I am here to offer you any support you need to fulfill your position, so please do not hesitate to ask," John stated to her. "Thank you," she replied. From within each work group, after some discussion and voting, a group leader was then elected. Justin was already selected as leader of the Logistics and Resource Distribution team, so there was no discussion or voting in his group. Now standing in front of Justin was a group of 50 or so people. Justin was in charge of them all. Justin felt nervous. He was responsible for dealing with all of these people. Would he even need this many people to do this job? He figured the best place to start would be to introduce himself. He already had a few ideas on how he wanted to do things, so he thought it would be best to voice them after his introduction. "Hello everyone, my name is Justin. I am the leader of the logistics team. We are in charge of getting tools, materials, and people in and out of the valley efficiently. We all have a very important role here. It is essential that the engineering teams get what they need, otherwise they may not be able to get the ship ready before the CME arrives. I think first we should assign one person to each engineering team. These people will be in charge of finding out what the teams need delivered or transported. Then, we can assign designated delivery people. These people will drive in the items the engineering teams need to conduct repairs on the Bronto. So, Any questions or suggestions? Justin said. Justin was proud of himself. He felt he spoke with clarity and made himself heard. He felt like he asserted himself as a strong leader. Justin then had a thought. Maybe John saw more than just his logistic skills in him. Maybe John brought him down because of his leadership skills too. After all, he did manage a small team of people in the orbital gateway. Justin never thought of his leadership skills as anything more than average, but maybe John saw things differently. The crowd of people in front of Justin all seemed to agree with him about his plan of attack. There was one person that raised their hand, however. Yes, Justin asked them. Hi Justin, it sounds like you've got a good plan going here. However, I have a suggestion, a member of the group inquired. Yes, of course, go ahead, Justin responded. One single person for every engineering group seems like a lot. Do you think it would be better if we assigned a few people for all the groups? I think it would be more efficient that way, suggested the person in the group. That seemed reasonable, Justin thought. He agreed. That's a good point. It would be more efficient that way. Thank you for your suggestion, Justin replied. Anything else, anyone? Justin asked again. There were no further questions or suggestions. Okay then. We will assign 3 information gatherers for now. Raise your hand if you wish to be one, Justin asked. Eventually, 3 hands arose from the group. Alright then. You, and you will be information gatherers. The rest of you will be designated drivers for now. However, I suspect that will change if we encounter any logistical challenges that require us to put our heads together to overcome. Also, 3 of you, what are your names? Justin instructed and asked. Darren. My name is Henry. I'm Phoebe, the 3 of them responded. Darren, Henry, Phoebe. Excellent. Alright everyone, let's move. If you have any questions or need anything, I will be by the entrance to the Bronto, Justin finished with. Darren, Henry and Phoebe went off to speak to the team leaders of the engineering teams. Everyone else in the group went off to get their cars. Slowly, the numerous amounts of people standing outside of the ship got to work, Justin's group included. Some were headed inside the ship, while others remained on standby, awaiting the parts and equipment they needed to begin. Justin watched on, fascinated at everyone all working together to get the ship ready. While he was watching everyone, his watching was interrupted when he spotted Abigail having a discussion with a few of the engineering team leaders. They were probably talking to her about technical stuff. Justin could tell it was stressing her out though. Her fidgeting was fast right now. Eventually, their conversation finished. Abigail turned around and walked in the opposite direction to the engineering team leaders, presumably to do some work. She locked eyes with Justin, but only briefly before she sheepishly looked away. She began to walk over to him. Once she reached him, she began to talk to him. Justin, I'm stressed out. One of the team leaders said they weren't entirely sure if I'm the correct choice to do this, and I think they are right, Abigail said to Justin. It was obvious by her tone of voice that she was upset. Justin was at first annoyed by that person's input on Abigail. It wasn't their place to be making comments like that. Personally, Justin trusted John's choice. He wouldn't put her in this position unless he was certain she could fill it. On the flip side, Justin understood where their lack of confidence in Abigail's abilities was coming from. This role was very important, and the lives of many were on the line. Having autism and doing a job like this would most likely end up being quite the challenge. It wouldn't make things impossible for her per se, but it sure wouldn't make them easy. Justin figured some comforting words may help to support her. Abigail, I believe in you. I know this is a job that can be tough for someone like you, but with some perseverance, I am sure you can see it through. If you need my help, or John's, or anyone else's, I'm sure they will be more than happy to assist you. You have a very stressful role. An important one at that, Justin replied. Thank you, Justin, Abigail replied. She extended her left hand for a handshake. Justin, in return, extended his. The 2 awkwardly shook hands, and Abigail then walked away. Justin was a little confused by this, but he understood it was probably her way of giving thanks. He found it kind of cute. The 2 of them then walked away and carried on with their jobs. As the night went on, work on the ship accelerated up to full speed. Thanks to the efforts of Justin, important materials and equipment were flowing in and out of the valley as needed. Slowly, the ship underwent repairs, little by little. Justin once again watched on. He couldn't help it, even though he knew he was getting a little distracted from an important job. It was a sight to behold, seeing all of these people working together so efficiently with such little time. It filled Justin with a sense of hope and confidence in the plan. He was filled with a sense of pride. Every person and component of the plan was running as it should. Justin had a great hope for their evacuation. Justin was busy in his newfound position. He was answering questions, planning car routes, taking delivery requests, and ensuring everything was running smoothly. In between these tasks, he would occasionally make delivery runs to help out his team where he could. Chapter 10. 30 hours until impact. It was approaching midnight on Solfilius. The freezing night air was really starting to settle in, and the workers were beginning to feel it more and more. Everyone was growing more tiresome by the hour. Despite this, they persisted. Many of the most essential repairs on the ship had now been finished. New parts had been brought in to fix old ones. More construction materials and parts were on their way thanks to the efforts of Justin and his team. The ship was not yet flight-worthy, however. Solfilius was located within a nebula. The Krotos system and the neighbouring stars were all very young. The sky was filled with dust and debris for at least a couple of light years out. The location of Solfilius might have something to do with the abnormal amount of staminite found within its crust, as it tends to form in areas of high stellar activity. Despite the high amount of debris limiting the types of spaceships capable of making it to Solfilius, the view of the night sky from here was almost enough to make up for the logistical challenges the nebula brought. The night sky glistened a spectacular red, with some hints of other warm colours. It was truly a sight to behold. Justin frequently found himself distracted staring at it. The view was much better down here than through the tiny windows in the orbital gateway. While he was distracted, John approached Justin. Justin was caught off guard by this, and was startled. He felt a little flustered, as he was fully zoned out during what was essentially an emergency operation. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" John commented. "The view of the nebula is far better down here than it is up in the gateway. Our small windows stop us from viewing the entire thing at once," Justin replied. "How is everything going on your end? Are you holding up well?" John asked. "I'm getting by. The whole CME thing is still really stressful though." "On the bright side, logistics is running as smooth as butter," Justin replied. "That is excellent to hear. I have a few things I need to inform you of. It should be fairly obvious by now, working day and night like this isn't sustainable. Everyone is going to become exhausted, and productivity will crash if we work everyone relentlessly like this. We need to establish a shift system so we can pace out work. My thinking is if we get half of the workers to work 6 hours, while the other half takes a break. Then, they swap every 6 hours until it's evacuation time, or we finish repairing the ship," John suggested. John was right. If everyone keeps up like this, they're going to run into some problems, Justin thought. "I agree with your idea, John," Justin replied. "Excellent. I would appreciate it if you could inform your team and get the shift time sorted," John replied. "One more thing. We have thousands of people sitting around that we could be utilising. Unfortunately, I have not found a use for them yet, and from what I have been able to gather, they desperately want to help out. Giving them the training they need to help conduct repairs on the ship with the time we have is impossible. Do you have any ideas?" John asked. "I could give them a crash course in what my group is doing. We could always use more delivery drivers," suggested Justin. "Of course. That is a good idea, Justin. I will send a few of these people over to see you when I get the chance," John said. John and Justin stood still for a few moments, trying to come up with any other uses for the spare people. Not taking advantage of their help would be a huge waste after all. Eventually, John thought up another idea. "There is a large pile of tools and equipment forming outside of the ship. It looks rather unorganised. Perhaps we could recruit a few of our non-technical people to sort out the pile. If it was more organised, workers would have to spend less time searching for the things they need. Also, if we provided a hub for our workers to access resources or services they might need, like medical help, water, or food in one location, it would boost morale, make work more comfortable, and increase productivity," John suggested. John let out a slight smile. He seemed impressed with himself, and with Justin. It looked like some of the immense stress digging into his mind had been removed. Justin was glad. From what Justin could tell, it seemed that a few of the non-technical workers were fed up with having no way to help, and they were blaming John for it. "Thank you very much for your help, Justin. This discussion was very productive, and it helped to relieve me of some stress," John said to Justin gratefully. Justin was somewhat intrigued by John's response. He was expressing a bit more emotion verbally than usual. It could be the pressure of the circumstances, Justin thought. However, they had been spending a lot of time around each other too. "One last thing. We will be having a meeting in about an hour with the engineering team leaders and with the council members. We are going to discuss how things are going with ship repairs and what we need to do moving forward," stated John. "Alright, I'll be there," Justin replied with. After their discussion, Justin continued his work. He informed his team of the change to work and how they would now be working in shifts. He organised his team's shifts quickly. A few of the workers that John was sending over arrived. Justin began teaching them the ropes of his delivery driving system. Delivery driving was quite simple, so it did not take them long to pick up on it. Justin had gotten caught up in his work. Time had flown by way faster than he expected it to. It was now time for the meeting. Justin spotted John and the council nearby, getting ready for the meeting. He dashed to their location, as he did not want to be late. The meeting was being held right next to the brand new utility hub. The utility hub was being set up rapidly. Large groups of people were moving supplies in and organising them into groups for people to access. The hub consisted of a large array of gazebos and other makeshift shelter that was found from around the base. Within the hub was a medical station, a place to access tools and equipment, and even a kitchen. For the meeting, the council had set up a large table with a few chairs around it. John was at the head of the table, standing up, waiting to address everyone. There were people everywhere who were not a part of the meeting. Some were there to return or pick up equipment, others were setting up the utility hub. Having a meeting here was not exactly ideal, but Justin liked the location far better than the cramped room they were in earlier today. Good evening, everyone. This is meant to be a quick meeting, and a way for our team leaders to relay their progress so we can all get a clearer picture of our current progress. This is a rather distracting place for a meeting, so let's try our best to stay on course, because as you are all aware, we have a lot of work to do, John began with. Now, who would like to begin? John asked. One of the team leaders began talking about their team's progress. The fusion reactor is nearly up to proper standards for spaceflight. Although it was working when you found it, we needed to make sure it would keep running once we were in space. Now, we've just got to give her a few final checks before she's good to go. Excellent to hear, John responded. More of the team leaders continued after them. The hull is still severely compromised. We still have a lot of work to do. If the fusion reactor team is close to being finished, we could definitely use their help to get the hull ready once they're free. Aside from that, we've been making some serious progress. The old graviton warp drive that this ship runs on is almost completely operable by now, but its outer protective layer still requires substantial work. VTOL thrusters still require some work, especially the back left thruster. We should have them done in time though. The electrical systems on this thing are a nightmare. There's a lot of corroded wiring that needs to be replaced. It's a miracle the computer systems still work when you guys booted them up for the first time in years. I doubt we will be able to get it all fixed up in time, but we can get the essentials up and running with some assistance. Fabrication team is going well, replacement parts being fabricated for the ship in a timely manner. We had a small fire break out earlier tonight in the warehouse, but it was dealt with quickly. A few more of the team members gave their updates too. By the sounds of what Justin was hearing, things seemed to be going well and good progress had been made. However, that didn't take away from the fact that there was still a lot of work to do. Justin, would you like to give us your update now? John asked. Justin had become lost in thought for a moment. He zoned back in again. He tended to zone out when tired. Sorry, John, I zoned out. Not feeling too energized right now, Justin apologized with. That's okay, Justin, we all are, John replied. Logistically, everything is going very well right now. We haven't had any big problems as of yet. Things have been running very smoothly. But once we start delivering bigger items, or items with more complex needs, we might run into a few challenges, Justin stated. Excellent to hear things are still going well, Justin. I am confident that you will find appropriate solutions to any challenges you may encounter, John replied. Encouraging to Justin. It gave him a much appreciated morale boost. Thank you, John, Justin replied. Abigail, you are our engineering leader. How have things been going on your end? We would love to hear your input, John asked of Abigail. Justin looked over at her. She looked rather overwhelmed. Addressing so many people at once was stressing her out. She stuttered a little while speaking and spoke slower than her normal speed. She faced down at the table and didn't even make a split second of eye contact with anyone. The ship has... the workers have made good progress. If we keep up at this speed, we could be finished by tomorrow evening, assuming there are no delays, she spoke. Thank you for the update, Abigail. That is excellent news. I appreciate you giving your input to all of us. I understand it is a difficult thing for someone in your shoes to do, John replied. Abigail gave a simple nod in return. Justin had noticed a bit of a change beginning to occur in John. He wouldn't normally say things to people so directly like that. If he wanted to show his appreciation for Abigail doing something difficult, he would imply it in another way. He didn't like saying things directly, from what Justin could make out. John had never seen so many stressed people in one place before. Maybe it tugged on the empathy strings in his head a little bit. Not that he wasn't already empathetic, however. He was just becoming more vocal about it. Well then, I believe that concludes our meeting. I'm confident we can do this together. We still have a long way to go, however, so let's get back to work, John ended with. Suddenly, Justin had a thought. He needed to get it out now, as it was very important. John, do we have a plan in place to rescue everyone in the utility station in orbit? Justin asked. Justin was not overly worried about them. He knew they would be okay, as they had access to an emergency evacuation ship they could use to avoid the CME. However, the ship was not capable of travelling interstellar distances. They will be docking with the Bronto in orbit and joining us on board, John replied. Ah, that makes sense. Thank you, Justin replied. Everyone got up out of their seats and headed off to their work sites. Justin walked up to John before he was about to leave. Hey John, in that meeting I noticed something. You've been acting a little different lately. You're normally quite reserved from what I've been able to gauge, especially when it comes to emotions. But you seem to be more vocal about them now. The way you spoke to Abigail at the meeting today is what sparked my idea to bring it up with you, Justin asked. Upon saying this, he started to second guess his decision to mention it. He felt like he was prying at John. He didn't want to come off as nosy. Justin also didn't want to seem like he was making a mountain out of a molehill. Either way, what was said now. Well, Justin, one of my philosophies is that actions speak louder than words. What you do through your actions tells more about someone as a person and their intentions than any words could hope to. But recently, something changed. I realized that it can be helpful to reinforce your actions through words. People are under incredible pressure right now, and I imagine the way I speak to them will go a long way to assist them. You brought up the example of Abigail. This is especially important in her case, as she often struggles to understand people unless they are direct and verbal with her. It makes a big difference in the lives of people like her when you speak to them in such a manner, John explained. Upon hearing this, Justin understood better now. It was good to see John working on his communication abilities. Justin also felt relieved that John did not feel like he was being pushy or weird. This is why I look up to you, John. You're wise, level-headed, and do what is best for people, Justin replied. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, John responded. John let out a slight smile. After the meeting, John and Justin both went on their ways. When Justin organised shifts earlier, he had volunteered to take the first shift. Now, his shift had finished, and he was finished working for a while. He would still be available for some very important questions or for emergencies, but the rest of the team would manage. They were already accustomed to their roles, and everything was running very well right now. The rest of the night was no different to its beginning. The workers kept working, repairs were conducted, materials and parts were delivered, and old ones taken out. Abigail managed the other engineers and technical workers. John was busy overseeing the whole operation. It wouldn't be long before everyone got off this planet, and that was something that everyone was looking forward to. Chapter 11. 24 hours until impact. Before anyone knew it, dawn had arrived. The faint glow of Krotos began to glisten over the sandy horizon, and the gentle glow of the nebula in the night sky slowly began to fade. The scientists in the labs on the opposite side of the base were hard at work monitoring the CME. Solfilius had access to an orbital telescope, primarily for observations of stars within the area. On the telescope was also various equipment to monitor Krotos. There was no sign of the CME slowing down. Morale was still going strong. The momentum of the workers showed no signs of slowing. However, almost everyone looked worse for wear. There was countless yawning. Bags were present under the eyes of every worker. Despite this, they all pushed on. They had no alternative. By this time, the utility hub for the workers was finished. There were a variety of workers now operating it. It gave some of the non-technical workers on the planet something to do who couldn't help out with repairs. They had even provided board games for everyone who was off shift. Justin could only see a handful of people playing them though. Everyone was either too stressed to focus or too tired to even bother playing. The area was quite large. It could fit hundreds inside comfortably. A large array of shade sails and gazebos had been set up. They were fashioned together from spare bed sheets, metal sheets, and other various materials found around the facility. The dust-ridden ground had been covered with whatever else the workers could find. Today was set to be very hot, and the shelter the hub provided would truly be put to the test today. Justin had found a mattress in the utility hub that he was laying down on. He needed to rest his eyes. He figured that it was safe to lie down, because there was no way he would accidentally fall asleep. His mind would simply refuse because of everything going on. Besides, if anyone needed him, they could just come find him here and wake him up. Surrounding Justin were many workers, all resting like him. Some had found mattresses to lay on. Many of them just opted for chairs. There was some quiet chatter amongst some of them. Discussion topics were broad, but it mainly centered around work, the ship, and getting off this planet. Justin heard some footsteps approach him. They got louder, and they stopped at the foot of his mattress. My, this is quite the operation you and your council buddies have put together here, a familiar voice spoke. It was Derek. Justin opened his eyes and sat up. Derek was standing at the foot of his mattress. He had his work clothes on. The technical workers needed all the help they could get. It seemed like John, or whoever was in charge of Derek, was willing to cut him some slack given the current circumstances. Oh, I feel like crap this morning. Gotta say though, the mashed potatoes the kitchen cooks up make for a surprisingly nice vodka, Derek continued, smugly. Justin rolled his eyes at him. He knew that for Derek, alcohol was nothing but a parasite. He wished, for Derek's own sake, that he would seek help. It cost him his job yesterday. Anyway, I've been assigned to work with the good people of the logistics team. I'll take it that's your group. I'm on shift now, so I'll see you in a bit, buddy. Derek finished. He patted Justin on the back and walked off to go and start work. Justin laid back down on his mattress and tried to get some more rest before he was on shift again. His mind raced with thoughts about the whole operation. What if this whole thing didn't work out? So many people would die, including him. He was extremely thankful he didn't have a partner or kids. There were many people here with families. Justin also found himself thinking about the other plan that was put forth, over and over. The plan to build 4 air filters from scratch and put them inside the Anklios. What if it was the superior option and the council had a lapse in judgment? What if repairing something of this size was a mistake? He drifted back to Derek once more. He wondered how he was handling things. He very well might be negligent and sarcastic on the outside, but deep down, he had a heart. He was far more emotional than he showed. Justin was willing to bet he was struggling just as much as everyone else. His mind then moved on to Abigail. Going through something like this was already for a normal person, let alone a person like her. Being overworked, overstimulated, and thrown out of a routine would have taken a number on her well-being. Justin found himself gaining a lot of care for Abigail rather quickly. It was in Justin's nature to care for those around him, even those who he didn't know. However, with Abigail, things were different. He felt himself worrying for her much more than he would have expected, considering that they only for a day or so. Perhaps, Justin thought for a second, but ultimately, he wasn't sure why. During Justin's obsessive thinking about everything happening on this dusty old planet, the call was made by the chefs for breakfast. Within the utility hub was a kitchen. The chefs on the planet were all operating it to feed everyone on site while they worked. Justin sat up on his mattress. The chefs were calling everyone up in small groups to avoid crowding the serving area. There were a lot of people to get through. Justin had now only realised how hungry he was. He sat patiently, anticipating his food. Eventually, Justin's section of the utility hub was called up for food. He walked up to the food area where everyone else was. He got a plate and was served bacon, eggs and toast. Breakfast, lunch and dinner all aligned with the start and end of shifts during the day, so they served as a convenient transitionary period between work times and rest times. Justin realised that Derek had gone off to work just before breakfast. He was never one to skip meals. Justin had a hunch it was because Derek was anxious. Justin found a table to sit at and started to eat his breakfast. The food was good. The bacon was high quality, which was rather shocking for food that had to travel all the way out here from Earth. The eggs were perfectly cooked too. The toast was just the way he liked it. Eating with a rebreather was awkward, however. He had to juggle holding it over his face, taking it off to put food in his mouth. Eventually, he finished his breakfast. Justin needed it. It was very relieving to be served hot food during a time like this. It also provided him with much needed energy. Justin's NFMC phone began to ring. He saw that it was Derek. He answered the phone. Hey buddy, sorry to bother you while you're off shift, but we need some help. I'm over at the fuel tank at the ship landing pad. We have a problem. We have to take the fuel from here and somehow get it into the ship, which is conveniently a few kilometers away from the tanks. I'm clueless, so are your lackeys here. If you could come take a look, it would be greatly appreciated. Oh, also, Abigail will be over here soon. Her gigantic cranium might lend us a much-needed hand, said Derek. Justin was conflicted on what to do. They would probably be fine to figure it out on their own. Justin was exhausted and needed this off-work time to rest. On the other hand, this was important, and they could use any help they could get. The ship wouldn't be going anywhere without fuel, after all. After some thinking, Justin made his mind up. He would head over to help them. He was feeling more energized after breakfast. If it wasn't for the food, he probably would have sat this one out. He got up and made his way over to his car. He got in and drove over to the ship landing pad. On his way over, he noticed just how empty the base felt. All the workers were busy trying to get the ship ready. It was strange to see. Base felt rather liminal. After some time driving through the base, Justin made his way to the ship landing pad. He parked and got out of his car, putting his rebreather back on. He spotted Derek and a few of his own workers over by the large tanks of rocket fuel. He saw Abigail's car nearby. She had just gotten out and was walking over to the tank. Justin followed suit. "Ah, Justin, you're here. And you must be Abigail," Derek said to the two of them. "Hi," Abigail replied. "Welcome, welcome. The saviours of the lackeys have arrived," Derek joked. Some of the other workers that were here, trying to help out with the problem, did not look very impressed with Derek's joke. "Derek, come on man, they're trying their best," Justin replied, frustrated. "Sorry." "Alrighty then, let's get to work," Derek chuckled to himself. "Right, Justin, you're our main man. Why don't you get us started?" Derek suggested. "So, could you guys fill me in? What do we have on our hands here exactly?" Justin asked. "Well, as you probably know, we have to get this fuel into the Bronto, but we've been struggling to come up with a way to move it. The Bronto is immobile, unflight-worthy, and has no fuel, so flying it over here isn't an option. We don't have any fuel trucks on site, so delivery via truck isn't an option either. The best we've come up with so far is just cutting the tank away from its supports and driving it over on the back of multiple cars, which would be rather risky, slow, and complex," stated one of the workers. "I agree. What you've got currently is not exactly an ideal solution," Justin replied. "I doubt the cars would be able to handle the weight in the first place anyway. I've done more work on these damn things than I care to count. Trust me, I would know. Their flimsy roofs can barely support the extra weight of a feather, let alone a giant fuel tank. Even with 10 or 12 cars driving the tank over, the chances of their collapse are still way too high to risk," Derek replied. "Do we have a big tube or a hose lying around anywhere? Also, do we have any big pumps?" Justin asked. "I see where this is going, Justin. If that idea is going to work, you're going to need a mighty big pump. Getting that much methane across and into the tank in time is going to take some serious force," Derek replied. "That water tank over there, next to the fuel tank, does it supply the base? It looks big enough to," Justin asked. Abigail's face lit up. She looked very eager to answer Justin's question. She looked like she would burst if she didn't spew out an answer in the next 2 seconds. "Yes, Justin, there are 2 tanks. One is the auxiliary tank that is used for firefighting and for other various emergency purposes. The other is the general use tank for drinking, cooking, showers, and industrial purposes. Each tank holds approximately 5 megalitres of water. The pumps that allow access to the tanks are both capable of outputting at a flow rate of 220 litres a second. The ship is approximately 8 kilometres from here. We have plenty of suitable pipes and around the base that are suitable for transferring fuel." Also, that Abigail spoke, before being cut off. "Whoa there, slow down, that's all the info we need," Derek interrupted. Justin was frustrated by Derek cutting it. Derek could have been more polite, but he chose not to be. "I'm sorry," Abigail muttered, looking embarrassed while staring at the ground. "That's okay, Abigail. You wanted to be thorough with your explanation," Justin replied, trying to comfort her. Justin gave Derek a frustrated look. Justin began to explain his idea. He was confident it was their best option for moving fuel. "Right, we need some people to remove one of the water pumps from the tanks there. Obviously, the water will need to be disconnected between the tank and the pump first before removal. After that, we will need to figure out a way to fasten it to the fuel tank. Then, we need to scavenge together 8 kilometers or so of hose. After that, we will attach the hose to the pump and feed it into the fuel tank of the Bronto," Justin instructed. Everyone in the group split into 2 smaller groups, one to look for the hose and the other to help set up a pump. Justin walked over to the emergency water tank with the workers. They had already brought some basic tools with them, so they could get to work straight away. Derek and Abigail decided it would be best if they both went and looked for hose with the other workers. The group figured the best place to start would be the 2 warehouses. "Hey Justin, do you think it's a good idea to disable the emergency tank like this? What if there's a fire?" one of the workers asked. This worker was the same one who filled Justin in on everything going on today when he arrived at the landing pad. "Good question. I figured we could just use the general purpose tank for emergencies instead. It's not like we'll be needing the water for much longer," Justin replied, with a little bit of humour. "Good point," the worker responded, smirking. "What's your name, by the way?" Justin asked the worker. He felt a little bad for not getting to know his fellow workers' names. "My name is Michael," Michael replied. "Michael, thank you," Justin replied. Justin and his small team were now at the water tanks. The workers helped Justin to turn off the water supply to the pump. There was a giant valve that needed to be closed by hand. It took 3 of them to seal the water supply shut. Then, using an angle grinder, they ground off the steel casing that connected the water hose to the water pump, severing the pump from the hose. Next, they unplugged the pump from the main grid. Then, they removed the pump bolt by bolt using a large industrial strength drill. It took all 6 of them to lift the pump off of the tank and onto the ground. Once it was underground, they got ready to haul the pump across to the fuel tank. It was heavy, so they needed to ensure that they did not overexert themselves. On the count of 3, everyone lift, Justin instructed. 1, 2, 3, he counted them in. Everyone picked up the pump at once and started to move it over to the fuel tank. On their way, they would occasionally stop to put it down and rest. It took a while to move it all the way over. Slowly but surely, they finally lugged the pump into position. Well then, good job everyone, that's that done, Justin thanked his team. Everyone was sweating. This was hard work in normal weather, let alone in the blistering heat of Solfilius. A couple of the workers sat down on the ground for a short rest, including Michael, who had helped out. Suddenly, one of Justin's team members collapsed without warning. Justin panicked. "Hey, are you alright?" Justin asked, alarmed. There was no reply. "Help me get him into the car. It's almost certainly the heat. We can keep him cool in there," Justin ordered. "On it," one of the workers replied, frantically. The worker quickly jumped into action, grabbing him by the legs while Justin grabbed his arms. They hauled him over and into Justin's car. Justin and the other worker got inside and let the airlock cycle before putting the air conditioning on. After a short period of time, the worker woke up. Justin let out a huge sigh of relief. "Oh man, my head hurts," the worker complained. "That's not a surprise. You hit the ground pretty hard," the other worker replied. "Oh, phew. Do you feel okay?" "You fainted?" Justin asked. "Apart from my head, I feel fine. I'm really thirsty though. I'm probably dehydrated," the worker replied. "We can get you some water. Stay in here for as long as you need," Justin said. Justin glanced over at the car console. It was 43 degrees Celsius outside. It was sweltering. It was no wonder the worker fainted. Justin opened his phone. He sent out a group message to all of his workers, asking one of them to bring some water out to the crew here. They were going to need it if they wanted to get this hosing out to the ship by the time the heat became intolerable. Even now they were cutting that deadline fine. Justin and the other worker stayed in the car for a while. Eventually, Derek, Abigail, and the other workers returned from the warehouses. On top of their cars were large reels of thick tubing. Each spool was a kilometre total in length. They had 9 of them between all the cars. That would be plenty to get the fuel across and into the ship. Justin decided it would be best to let someone else take care of his patient, as he would probably be needed to help lay down the piping. "Are you all good to take care of him?" Justin asked the other worker in the car who had just helped. "All good, Justin," the other worker replied. As soon as everyone had parked their cars and got out, Justin put on his rebreather and got out of the car. He made sure to be quick so his patient wouldn't be without standard air for too long. Derek and the other workers began to carefully lift the spools of tubing off the roof of their cars and onto the ground. The heavy spools made a loud thump as they kicked up dust from the surface. "Nice work everyone, these will be perfect," Justin said, praising his team. All of the workers seemed satisfied with their efforts. "Hey Justin, I got your message while we were out. I've got a few big bottles of water in my car. Everyone is more than welcome to use them," a worker said. "Thank you, I appreciate it a lot," Justin replied. The worker went to grab a bottle and brought it to Justin. He took it and brought it over to the car he was just in. He knocked on the door. The door opened and he handed the bottle to the worker who fainted, and the other worker. "Thank you so much," the worker who fainted replied. He began to drink quickly from the bottle. "You're very welcome," Justin replied, before walking away to help with the fuel hose. "Well then, you're the genius here. How should we go about getting a fuel hose from here to the ship?" Derek asked. Justin did some thinking for a minute. Laying it out on foot was hardly an option. The heat was getting far too intense. At this rate, it may even become impossible to be outside without proper protection. Justin thought about it some more. An idea came to his head. "Well, we could try to wheel the tubing across the base using our cars. It would be faster that way. Only problem is how we go about doing that," Justin suggested to Derek and the others. "I have a telescopic metal rod in my car," Abigail stated. Justin was a little surprised. Why did Abigail have this in her car? More importantly, how was it supposed to help? "Yep, that'll do," Derek replied hastily. Justin figured that Derek had a good idea, judging by his quick reply to Abigail's statement. Adding to this, Derek seemed to be getting impatient with the job. Who could blame him though? It was boiling outside, and everyone wanted to escape the heat as soon as they could. Abigail walked over to her car to grab the rod. She took it out of the boot and brought it over. "Thank you," Derek said, taking the rod from her. "Man, this thing is heavy. What's in this thing, uranium?" Derek asked, surprised at its weight. "It's made from pure iridium. It's very strong. Still, please be careful with it," Abigail said to Derek. Derek extended the rod to its full length and fed it through the back doors of his car, laying it across the seat. When Derek wasn't drunk, he was quick on his feet, both in social settings and in his problem-solving abilities. Even in this dreaded heat, he still proved to be very valuable. "I think the best way we do this is with 2 cars. If we feed the rod through one car and into the other, we can loop the rod through a spool and drive it along until we run out of hose, then rinse and repeat with the next spool," Derek suggested. Justin was happy with the idea. It sounded like a good plan. He wanted to get out of here as soon as he could, both for his own sake and the sake of his fellow workers. "Yep, let's do that. It sounds good, and I think we all want to get out of this heat," Justin replied. Derek and another worker lifted up the spool of tubing and rolled it over and onto the rod. While Derek and the other workers were getting everything else set up and ready to go, Justin's curiosity got the better of him, and he asked Abigail about her iridium rod. "Abigail, why did you have a thing like that in your car?" Justin asked. "It was given to me by a friend. I take it everywhere with me. She used to be an engineer here too, before she left for a job back on Earth," Abigail replied. The first thought that came to Justin's mind is that this rod was a rather unusual thing to give to someone as a gift. Maybe this friend of Abigail's knew she would like it because of her special interest in engineering. "Abigail, are you sure it's okay we use the rod for this?" Justin asked. "Yes, I know everything there is to know about that rod. The rod's yield strength is 1.25 times higher than the maximum force the cars can exert on it while they undergo acceleration. It will not bend or break. If it did, however, I would be very sad about it," she replied. Justin was impressed by Abigail's vast wealth of technical knowledge. She seemed to have just about every single bit of information she would ever need for her job right inside her head. It was no wonder at all how Abigail had managed to land a job here. "That's very impressive, Abigail," Justin said. "Thank you," she replied. Derek got in his car. The worker that helped Derek to fit the spool of tubing onto the rod got in the car next to his. They began to drive away slowly, in synchronization. A couple of workers held onto the end of the pipe at the landing pad, ensuring that it wouldn't drag along with the car, and that the spool of piping would unwind as intended. The other cars then followed suit, carrying extra spools of hose with them, to replenish their supply along the way. Justin and the other workers walked back over to the fuel tank to resume work on the pump, as it was not yet attached to the tank. They located a spare outlet valve without a pump attached. This outlet valve saved the effort of removing one of the pumps already on the fuel tank. The workers lifted the pump into position with the help of a couple jacks that were in one of the workers' cars. They then bolted the pump in place. Using some ingenuity, Abigail hooked up the pump to a nearby power box, connecting it to the main grid. It took some fidgeting, but eventually she got the pump hooked up to the electricity it needed to function. The 2 workers holding the end of the fuel hose brought the hose to the pump, fitting it to the end. The pump was ready to run. Now, they just needed to wait for Derek to arrive at the ship. Everyone was drenched in sweat after all their work. The heat was becoming unbearable. Abigail, despite performing the least physical labour, seemed to be in the worst condition. She was the first to retreat to her car, followed by everyone else. Justin got inside his car, ensuring he knocked on the window firstly to warn his patient of his intention to get inside. As he was getting inside, he received a call from John. "Justin, the heat out here is becoming intolerable for our workers. Our medical bay is filling up with people suffering from heat stroke and other heat-related illnesses. This is becoming unsustainable and putting a lot of unnecessary stress on our workers. I am moving everyone inside until the heat dissipates. Essential work will still be carried out, but those performing the work will be in spacesuits for their own personal protection," John stated. Justin was rather concerned. Although everyone may only have to be inside for a few hours, it could cause serious delays to their schedule. He just hoped that the delay wouldn't end up becoming catastrophic. "Thank you, John. I appreciate it. We had someone faint while we were figuring out how to get fuel to the Bronto. We are running a fuel hose from here to the ship. I finished everything I have to do here. Everyone else and I are looking forward to getting out of this horrid heat," Justin replied. "Excellent to hear. I hope your fellow worker is okay, and I wish them the best. I must go now, as I've been inundated by important tasks. Goodbye for now, Justin. I will be in touch later," John replied, before hanging up. Justin sent out a group text to everyone on his team, letting them all know what was going on. Afterwards, he called Derek to tell him about the situation, and to check in on how he was going. "Hey, Derek, The surface is being evacuated inside for a few hours. It's getting too hot for anyone to work without endangering themselves. How much longer do you have left until you are finished? I don't want you or anyone else getting hurt, Justin said, expressing his concern. She'll be right. We'll be finished very soon, Derek replied. Justin was uneasy about Derek's reply. On one hand, he could be telling the truth. Derek should nearly be finished feeding the pipe into the Bronto, judging by how long he was now gone for. On the other hand, in typical Derek fashion, he could be towing the line of safety and endangering himself and others, and spending more time in this heat than Derek and the other workers had to. We've attached the tubing to the fuel tank. You're all good to go, Derek followed up with on call. Justin was relieved. It wasn't the latter this time, fortunately. Justin got out of his car and walked over to the pump. It had only been a few minutes since he was last outside, and there was already a noticeable increase in temperature. It was scorching out here. Justin quickly turned on the pump, and the fuel started flowing. He gave a thumbs up to his team members. They all took off in their cars to head inside. Justin swiftly followed suit. Chapter 12. 20 hours until impact. Justin was once again back in his car. Before heading inside to his accommodation, Justin took a detour to the medical bay nearby his living quarters to drop off his patient. There were numerous cars around the medical building. The heat had clearly been causing strife. The energy was getting tense. People were frustrated, and the soaring temperatures were not helping at all. They needed medical treatment, and the medical staff were already swamped with patients. The sight of so many cars frustrated Justin. For a base of this size, he wondered why some kind of public transport system hadn't yet been established. He figured it would benefit the base greatly. Justin drove up to the medical bay, parking as close as he could. "Thank you, Justin. We'll be okay from here," said the worker who fainted. Justin decided to offer more help. He would feel bad if he didn't. "Are you sure? I can help you get him inside if you want to." "It looks chaotic out there," Justin offered. "No, it's okay. We'll be fine. Thanks for your offer," the other worker replied. "Okay then. I'll be off. Thank you for your help with the pump. I hope you feel better soon," Justin replied. The workers got out of the car. The worker who fainted held on to the other for support, as he was still feeling a little weak, and they both made their way inside. They were clearly both exhausted. Justin drove off back towards his living quarters. It should have been a minute or so from the medical bay to his accommodation, but with all the other cars around, it took quite a bit longer. Eventually, he made it. Justin got out of his car and joined the massive line of people crowding the 3 airlocks in front of the building, trying to get inside. He was astonished that no one had been trampled yet. With heat like this and a crowd of people this size, it would be all too easy for someone to faint in the crowd and get trodden on. He joined the crowd hesitantly. Any efforts to organise anyone in this intense heat would simply be in vain. Everyone was too busy trying to get inside. After a while, he got inside one of the airlocks with a group of other people. The airlock cycled, and he was let inside. Once inside, he made his way to his room to wait out the heat. However, it wouldn't be too long before he would need to venture back outside again. He would be on shift soon. He would need to wear a spacesuit for protection this time. He was not looking forward to it. However, for now, he was relieved to be inside. The next few hours inside provided Justin with some much-needed rest. The building was heavily insulated and air-conditioned, so the conditions inside were very pleasant compared to outside right now. Justin lied down on his bed to rest his eyes. However, he didn't stay lying down for long once his stomach started aggressively grumbling. In the centre of the living quarters was a large common room which contained a food court. Considering the state of his stomach, Justin decided it would be imperative to eat lunch before his shift. Justin left his room and walked to the common room to get something to eat. After a short walk down the long hallway of the accommodation building, Justin arrived at the common room. The common room was a large, circular, 3-story tall room. It was minimalistic in design, however a few of the chairs and benches contrasted this theme with their fancy decorations and details. The room was packed with people right now, the food court especially. The chefs that were outside earlier today serving breakfast had temporarily moved inside so they could serve people within the confines of the air-conditioned building. Justin went up to one of the vendors within the food court. The line was very long. Fortunately, the line died down quickly, thanks to the efficiency of the chefs. When it was his turn to order, Justin got himself a sandwich. The sandwich had excellent texture, and Justin thoroughly enjoyed it. He was glad he waited in line for it, as it was delicious, and he was almost keeling over from starvation by the time he received it. There wasn't much that Justin liked about Solfilius. However, the food was one of those exceptions. John had chosen some great chefs to work here, and Justin was thankful for it. After lunch, Justin sat down in the common room for a while. He would have searched for John or Abigail so he could sit with them, but they were both busy right now with other work. From what Justin could gauge, John and Abigail both worked different shifts to the standard 6-on, 6-off approach that the other workers did. He figured it had something to do with their workload and importance to the mission. Justin would have sat with Derek, but he knew he was situated in the other accommodation facility across the ravine. After lunch, Justin went to get a spacesuit from within the living quarters. He would be needing it for his shift. There was an equipment room situated right next to the common room. Within the room was a wide variety of different items that the workers might need in their day-to-day work. The room was also used for general purpose storage and as a lost and found facility. Justin walked inside the room and grabbed a spacesuit that fit him. After obtaining the spacesuit, Justin went back to his room for a while to try and relax. He lay down on his bed inside for a while. An hour and a half passed by. Justin noted the time and Justin was once again on shift. He wasn't looking forward to it. Although his lunch and rest helped his condition, he was still exhausted. But Justin knew he had to push on, for the good of everyone on this planet. Justin took the spacesuit that he had obtained, and he left his room. He walked down the long hallway of the accommodation building and through the airlock. Thankfully, the dreadful heat outside was not capable of penetrating the thick insulation of the spacesuit. He made his way over into his car and got in. He turned on the engine and began to drive away from the living quarters and over to the Bronto. He glanced at the temperature gauge on his car's dashboard. It was 62 degrees Celsius outside. The gauge had a safety warning displayed above it. Being out in this sort of weather unprotected for too long could definitely be dangerous. Justin looked up through the windscreen. Krotos was directly overhead. He flinched upon looking up. Krotos was overwhelmingly bright. The tinted window did little to shield his eyes. Justin could see heat ripples on the top of his car's bonnet and even over the horizon. It was scorching out there. Driving. Justin arrived at the Bronto. The number of workers had dropped substantially after everyone was evacuated out of the area. Work had slowed to a crawl. The spacesuits weren't exactly helping with productivity either. Upon seeing this, Justin began to worry. The lack of people was clearly killing their productivity. It was paramount that he and the other workers kept performing essential work on the craft, because if they didn't, they ran the risk of ending up with an unfinished ship. Justin figured there was no point standing around watching, so he got to work right away. For some reason, a large group of Justin's crew had parked next to the ship and were all discussing something. Justin thought it would be best to check up on them. Derek was a part of this group too. Justin walked up to them. "Hey, how's everything going?" Justin asked them. "Hey buddy, well, we've run into a bit of a problem. We need to move some big-time cargo over to the ship. The engineers here need it to get on top of old Betsy here more easily. They've asked for a few scissor lifts and also a cherry picker. There's a few in the parts and service warehouse, but getting them over here is the problem. The valley here is steep, and if we just drive them in, I can almost guarantee you they'll have a topple," replied Derek. Although he had many flaws, Derek was intelligent. He was great at spotting problems. Adding on to this, Derek often came up with solutions to problems just as quickly as he could find them. "Should we go take a look at what we're dealing with here?" asked Justin. "Sounds like a plan to me," Derek replied. Derek began to walk towards his car, and Justin followed. They both got in. Justin and Derek both took their helmets off. Justin's nose was met with a stench of alcohol and something else foul. He flinched upon smelling it. Derek's car was a mess. There were various mechanical and electrical parts scattered over the floor. Food and drink containers littered the dashboard and seats. "You've never been one for being tidy, have you, Derek?" Justin said smugly. I've got better things to do with my time," Derek replied. "Yeah, of course you do," Justin responded sarcastically. Derek turned on the engine and began to drive towards the parts and service warehouse. Justin hadn't been into the parts and service warehouse before. He imagined it would be similar to the construction and fabrication warehouse in a lot of ways. Only difference being, obviously, this one was for equipment and vehicles rather than the building of equipment and vehicles. Derek pulled up to the warehouse. Justin and Derek got out of the car, not before putting on their helmets, however. The outside of this warehouse was identical to the construction and fabrication warehouse. There were 3 doors into the warehouse, 1 large and 2 small. Derek and Justin walked up to the small door designed for people and walked inside. Justin scanned over the building. It was filled with all kinds of equipment and machinery. He spotted a cherry picker over in the far right corner. Close to it were a few scissor lifts, 5 to be exact. They wouldn't be needing that many, however. Over there, signalled Justin. Good spotting, Derek replied. The two made their way over to the scissor lifts and the cherry picker. As they walked over, they passed all sorts of equipment and vehicles. Cars were a major one. There were thousands of cars on site for personal worker transportation. It was important that an effective system was in place to maintain and repair them when needed. It seemed like everyone here most certainly had a good system going, from what Justin could tell. Apart from the large number of cars, there were loads of tools and other pieces of equipment at various stations positioned around the warehouse floor. Each had almost every tool a worker here could possibly need. The workshop was a mess. A lot of items appeared to be missing. Tools and items were everywhere. There also wasn't a worker inside. They were all either indoors or conducting repairs on the ship. It was rather eerie to see such a huge, once bustling place like this so empty. Justin and Derek had made their way over to the scissor lifts and the cherry picker. Justin took a good look at them. They looked rather old. They could do with some touch-ups, Justin thought. We could drive all of them over to the edge of the valley. But once we get to the steep valley edge, we'll have ourselves a little problem. I'm fresh out of ideas. You got any? Derek asked. Justin stood still and thought about the problem for a few seconds. He began to study the lifts to see if anything on them could help. After some time, he noticed that they all had hard points in their fronts, most likely so they could be towed. This gave him an idea. What if we attach a winch to them and lower them into the valley slowly with a car? Justin suggested. You know what, buddy? You might just be onto something there. I see no reason why that wouldn't work, Derek replied, while deep in thought about the idea. Alrighty then. Let's get these bad boys to the valley edge and go from there, Derek said, fired up. Justin and Derek both climbed inside of a scissor lift and a cherry picker, respectively. The scissor lift had a small platform on its base that had a steering wheel and a throttle handle. The throttle controlled the speed, and when pulled backwards, would put the lift into reverse. There was a bright red button that served as an emergency stop, and a green button to turn the electric engine on. Justin had never used one of these before. He pressed the green button. The engine whirred to life. He slowly pushed the throttle forwards. The throttle was a little stiff, probably from rust and the machine's age. The scissor lift began to move forward slowly. Looks like you've already got the hang of it. I was going to teach you how to use it, but looks like you're already an expert, Derek joked. Derek followed Justin in the cherry picker. They drove over to the large vehicle door at the front of the warehouse. The door opened automatically and led them into a large airlock. The airlock had 2 huge air pumps attached to its sides to filter out the massive air that was in the room. They roared as they sucked out the air in the room, filtering it with the Solfilius atmosphere. The front of the airlock door opened, letting them outside. Derek and Justin drove slowly across the ground, dust kicking up behind them. The speed of the lifts came nowhere near the speed of the cars. Their trip would be a lot longer than normal because of this. After a long drive, they eventually made it to the edge of the valley. Justin contacted his team on his phone. He instructed them to bring a car with a few people to help them out. He also asked them to go and retrieve Derek's car from the warehouse and bring 2 more scissor lifts from inside. Justin and Derek sat around for a while and waited for help to arrive. They chatted a little bit while they waited. Eventually, 2 cars turned up, one of which was Derek's. After a little bit more time, the other 2 scissor lifts turned up. There were 4 people from Justin's team here now, 1 in each vehicle, totaling 6 when Justin and Derek were included. Justin and Derek got out of their lifts. The 2 cars parked directly behind the cherry picker and the scissor lift. Justin and Derek walked up to the cars, taking the winches from them and hooking them onto the scissor lift and the cherry picker, respectively. We've got to move quickly. Let's lower both of them down at the same time. We got a schedule to meet, Derek suggested. Agreed. Take extra care though. We don't want any accidents on our hands, Justin warned. Justin got his phone out and called the driver that was now attached to the scissor lift. Derek followed suit, doing the same and calling the worker attached to the cherry picker. Alright, start driving down slowly, Justin instructed his team member. Bring it down, easy does it, Derek also instructed. Justin, Derek, and the other 2 workers watched on in suspense. The cars began to creak forward. The cherry picker and scissor lift both began their descents down the slope. The slope was around 50 meters long. The Bronto wasn't in a big valley. A ditch might have been a more accurate term if it was any smaller. Despite this, 50 meters was still a long way to lower 2 giant pieces of equipment. Slowly but surely, the cherry picker and the scissor lift made their way down the slope. At this point, the vehicles were around halfway. Justin could feel sweat forming on his forehead. He wasn't sure if it was because of the tension of the situation, the heat, or both. Justin could tell just by looking that it was boiling outside of the confines of his spacesuit right now. It almost felt like the heat was magically seeping through the thick insulation in his suit. Justin's heart skipped a beat when he caught himself zoning out thinking about sweat. His eyes immediately darted over to the scissor lift in the car he was responsible for. He felt a rush of relief when he saw things were still under control. "Keep it steady, you're doing well," Justin encouraged the driver. Only a few more meters now. Justin began to feel the weight of the situation lift, but they still weren't out of the woods yet. The cherry picker and the scissor lift began to level out as they reached even ground, followed by the cars lowering them. "Success. Great job, everyone," Justin said to his team members once they got out of the cars. The other two workers were cheering from the top of the valley. "Thank you, Justin," said Michael, the same worker Justin was speaking to earlier in the day. He was the person driving Derek's car. The cherry picker and the scissor lift had been lowered down into the valley successfully. Now, they had to repeat the process with the other two scissor lifts. Justin and Derek followed the same procedure once more, this time with the remaining two scissor lifts. Michael and the other worker drove the cars back to the top of the valley. Then, they hooked up the winches to the scissor lifts. Justin and Derek called the workers on their phones to communicate with them while they were inside. Michael and the other worker then began their descent. Gently, the scissor lifts crept down the side of the valley. They were holding a steady pace. Out of the corner of his eye, Justin spotted something. Derek's car, and the scissor lift attached to it, were beginning to move faster. He nearly missed it because he was too focused on his own car and scissor lift. He figured Derek would pick up on it, though. He needed to focus. He couldn't afford to take his eyes off of his job for a second. If these scissor lifts fell over, it would be a costly and very risky delay. "Derek, the brake in your car is stuck. I can't push down enough to slow down," Michael yelled over the phone. This caught Justin's ear. "Brake, we got a problem with Derek's lift," Justin blurted out over the phone to his driver while panicking. Justin had quickly realised Derek and the driver of his car needed assistance. The scissor lift would have to wait before descending further. The car was now gaining speed, along with the scissor lift. Derek, Justin, and the two other drivers panicked. By this stage, Derek had frozen. He had a look of fear in his eyes Justin didn't see very often at all. Justin desperately tried to come up with a way to stop the scissor lift in the tiny amount of time he had, to no avail. As the scissor lift hit the flat ground at the bottom of the valley, it dug itself into the sand, grinding itself to a hole. Derek's car, along with Michael, were headed straight for the scissor lift he was towing. If the car rammed into the scissor lift, it could knock the lift over. Worse, Michael could be hurt. Michael swerved out of the way just before impact. The winch was still attached to the lift, however. If Michael didn't detach the winch, he ran the risk of pulling the scissor lift over. "Kill the winch!" yelled Derek in a panic. He had come out of his freeze state. Michael scrambled over the call to find the emergency button to disconnect the winch. The winch was nearly out of slack until Justin and Derek heard the click of the winch disconnecting. The car flew along the sand before turning around and slowly coming to a stop near Justin and Derek. Justin, Derek, and the other workers rushed over to see if Michael was okay. The car door opened, and Michael stepped out. "Hey, are you okay?" asked Justin, worried. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little shaken up is all," Michael replied. "Well, what can I say? The NFMC standard issue cars are nothing less than a gift from the heavens," Derek joked, pausing momentarily to think of a comparison in his statement. Justin knew from a great amount of experience that Derek was one to suppress his emotions. Under that carefree, charismatic exterior was a neglected inner child, desperate to have their needs met. Derek had highly abusive parents, and his father was a severe alcoholic. It was a tragedy, really. Derek coped by drinking, partying, and joking away his worries. During their high school years together, Derek saw Justin as a second home, a much safer and kinder one than his first. Derek's emotional side would only come out in particular circumstances. Stressful events like the one that just took place were an example of one of those times. Times when it all became too much for him, and his facade collapsed under the weight. "Hey Derek, I just found a piece of garbage stuck under your brake pedal. The problem wasn't the car, it was all the clutter inside," said Michael, in an astonishingly calm tone considering what had just happened. "Well damn, maybe a clean out or two every now and again wouldn't hurt," Derek sarcastically replied. Although Derek's response seemed somewhat emotionally detached, Justin could tell by the look in his eyes that he was genuinely concerned for Michael's safety and for the successful delivery of the scissor lift. Derek just didn't have it in him to communicate that. It was too much for him. After the shake-up, Justin, Derek, and the workers then finished lowering Justin's scissor lift down the valley. After this, using a car winch, they pulled Derek's scissor lift out of the sand carefully. After, they drove the scissor lifts and the cherry picker over to the ship. Abigail was waiting beside the ship for the delivery. Justin, Derek, and the 2 other workers got out of the lifts and walked over to her. "Here are the lifts you wanted, Abigail," Justin said. "We nearly killed one of our own getting them, but here we are," Derek joked once more. "Killing people is bad, so that would have been bad," Abigail responded to Derek, awkwardly. "Yep, you can surely say that again, Abigail," Derek added. "Thank you for the scissor lift and the cherry picker, Justin. Oh, and you, Derek. I nearly forgot to thank you," she finished with. "You're very welcome," Derek replied with.